Yo, what's up guys, Grim here, and in today's video we're going to be going over some breaking news which has just dropped, and that is in regards to some future characters that look like they might be coming a lot sooner than a lot of us thought in the community. So the characters we're going to be talking about are Yukong over here, Luocha, as well as Silverwolf. Now these just dropped on official sources as teasers on Bilibili from MiHoYo. Now there wasn't any post regarding when they were coming or anything like that, but I think we can make some assumptions here. So we know Jin Yuan is next, and we know his accompaniments, which are probably going to be Su Shang and Ting Yun. So what would come after? Well, I mean, if someone's going to post character images as well as some breakdowns, as well as a new character which we haven't seen and didn't even know a character was gonna be of, I think it's pretty safe to assume that we can speculate that these are going to be the characters that are coming in patch 1.1 after Jin Yuan has finished and seen his run. So we actually know what two of these characters do. We know what Silverwolf does and we know what Luocha does, but there has actually been some pretty big changes that we can observe just by playing through the story in the game. So if you guys are new, what we're going to do here is we're going to break down the following. We're going to break down assuming these characters are in 1.1, should you save? There is going to be quite a lot of speculation in this video, so treat it as a little bit of entertainment and maybe you'll get a little bit of information, but really what we're doing here is just discussing some upcoming characters. But I'm going to go over the pros and cons of each of these characters and how they were in closed beta 2, as well as the changes that they seem to be having. Alright, let's get into it. So first and foremost, we have Silverwolf. So Silverwolf is a character who will be played as a support if she's at all similar to her closed beta 2 variant. So right now she is in the game, you can play her in the tutorial, and she has seen some changes. In closed beta 2, she was a Nihility quantum supporting character who is probably going to be played pretty similarly to Pella, Welt, Bronya, or Ting Yun in the current game, meaning that she's going to be basic attacking and then using her skill sometimes to apply a very strong debuff, and then use her ultimate when it's up as well. Now, she has seen some changes though. In the closed beta 2, she was a specialist of armor shred, slowing, as well as reducing attack on a single target. In addition to that, she also had access to implanting vulnerabilities of non-natural elements into an enemy. So if you had an enemy and they were vulnerable to quantum, imaginary, and ice, you could implant the fire weakness into them if you had multiple or a single fire member on your team. That was how she worked. She also lowered the resistances of the enemy substantially, meaning that she offered not only utility but also offense. But the thing with Silverwolf is that she also offered a ton of slowing capabilities in the terms of her ultimate. Her ultimate would be a guaranteed entanglement, which would reduce the action gauge of any enemy hit by it. So overall, she pretty much had the works. She had defense, she had utility, and she had offense, and she had a really powerful ability to manipulate the turn gauge, which was really looking really strong. The only downside that Silverwolf had was that she was a hard single target character. Now, we don't know too much about how she's changed. We only know that she has changed, and it is a reasonably substantial change. A lot of her numbers got moved around, it seems, based on our tutorial experience, and based on our tutorial experience as well, between closed beta 2 as well as 3 and then live, her ultimate no longer seems to entangle. So overall, she has lost a little bit of her utility, but it's fair to say that she's probably still retaining most of her stuff. She still implants all the debuffs that she seems to have. We don't know the numbers on them yet, and she can still do the vulnerability stuff. We don't know the numbers on that either, but she still does seem to retain pretty much everything she had in closed beta 2. And Silverwolf overall has been one of the most hyped units, has been one of the most anticipated units, and to see her coming so soon is actually surprising. Now we're going to get into exactly how viable and how worth she might be to pull in a second here, but I want to kind of touch on all the characters first and foremost. So let's get into the next one here, who is Luocha. So Luocha is a healer, and that's how he was in closed beta 2, unless we see any major changes. But in live he was also a healer in the campaign where you get to try him out. And Luocha is going to be looking like more of an offensive healer. He is imaginary typing, unless they change that, but it looks like he's still imaginary based on this image. And of course, he does have that healing class. Now, in live, right now, you only get one healer, and that is Natasha. If you were fortunate enough to get Bailu or Japad, you can kind of make do, and you can kind of have that 2-healer roster. But as someone who's gone pretty deep into Memory of Chaos, we'll get into that in a bit, you definitely want to have a second healer. It is really critical to be able to have the option to sustain your team team over a long drawn out fight. Without it, you're going to be relying on killing the enemy before they kill you. While that is a viable option when you get enough gear, right now when you're progressing, it's going to be pretty tough. So Luocha is that second healer. He is a deterministic way to get that. You don't have to go ahead and get Bailu or get lucky. You can just get Luocha, but it seems like he might be coming. So was he any good? What was his theme? How overall did he work? Well, he was actually an offensive type healer, and he was a little bit wonky in closed beta 2, to be honest. But he's seen some pretty massive changes to his kit based off of how we could play him in the tutorial and campaign missions. So back in closed beta 3, the way he worked, or closed beta 2 as well, is that he has a kind of charge system. He needs to perform a certain amount of actions in order to actually do a big heal. And in the closed beta 2, that was 3 charges overall. He needed to do 3 special actions to activate his big heal. We don't get too much into it. I actually have a video on Luocha if you're interested. You can kind of check out the links for Silver Wolf and Luocha down below. But he basically had a lot of mechanics which he needed to kind of pull off in a pretty specific way in order to do his big AoE heal, which you really need in Endgame. Now, based on the tutorials, his kind of requirement to pull off that AoE heal got moved from 3 actions to 2 actions. You can see it very clearly when you get to play him, and that is a big deal. So he has been reworked somewhat. We don't know to what extent, but he has been reworked quite a lot. Now in closed beta 2, he also had a way to passively heal without using any skill points, which is critical, which that definitely puts his stocks up. In addition to that, he also had an AoE dispel on enemies, which is a really big deal, especially in the Memory of Chaos. That is a big deal. But in addition to that, overall, like kind of assessing Luocha now after playing a lot more, he actually does have another big strength which other healers don't have, and that is, as an offensive healer, his basic attacks are obviously going to be breaking, but also his ultimate will be breaking as well. He has an AoE ultimate which breaks imaginary, and all AoE ultimates on characters right now actually break 2 break units of damage, so his should be no different. He should be breaking 2 units of imaginary in the AoE scenario. So both Silverwolf and Luocha have 2 of the best types in the game for supports, and that is quantum and imaginary, because it allows you to manipulate the turn order of the battle, and that is really something that you're pretty interested in to have on your supports. So overall, both of these characters look like they're going to be incredibly powerful in their own respective way, and they're both supports, which is a big deal. One of them sustaining, one of them is offensive/defensive, and I'm going to be showing you guys exactly how they slot into teams in a second here. But overall, it's a big deal that these guys are coming, and they are both going to be immensely powerful based off of just the small tweaks that we've seen so far. Silverwolf was already overwhelmingly strong on single targets, but maybe she's seen a bit of a reduction in some of her utility, but she'll still be really strong, I think. And Luocha just seems to have been flat out buffed, unless there's some things which we don't know about his numbers. He has definitely seen some pretty big changes as well. And knowing what we know about the game now, both of them fit into a lot of teams and have a lot of value. Supports in this game are definitely something that you're going to want a lot more of than DPS characters, so they definitely got a lot more value, at least in my eyes. The next one here is Yukong. She seems to be some sort of an imaginary 4-star kind of character here. We don't know what her path is. We don't know what she does. All we know that she is imaginary and she is 4-star, and Pride went here speculate that she might be given away for free, so that would be good, but it's pretty much a guarantee that she's going to be on one of these guys' banner if they were to be the next 2 characters. So overall, that's pretty cool. I mean, there's not really much to talk about with Yukong, so we're going to go ahead and move on to the other 2, and as well as trying to answer that question, should I save? Should I speculate and try and go for one of these 2 characters? Now again, to reiterate, we don't know what extent their kits have been reworked. All we know that they are reworked, 100% they're reworked. They're going to be different than they were in closed beta 2. And we also don't know that they're even actually 100% confirmed yet for 1.1. All we know is that there's some very strong indicators. Alright guys, now that we have a pretty good understanding of the characters, it's really now time to understand how they're going to fit into the current endgame teams. Now if you want more information and want to deep dive on each of the characters, Silverwolf and Luocha, you guys can check out their full kits based on how they were in closed beta 3 and 2. Down below, there's like a full-on breakdown of them, and you guys can start understanding what they're worth. But I think it's pretty important to understand exactly how they'll slot into teams, as well as what units they're already competing with, and kind of how much risk and value and potential payoff there is in saving for them. Now it goes without saying, big disclaimer here, that kits can change and your account is going to be different to everyone else's account, so only you can decide whether or not it's worth it. What I'm here to do is provide you guys information so that you can maybe entertain some ideas and make the decision which is best for you. Let's get into it. So in Endgame right now, people are progressing into Memory of Chaos 8, 9, and 10, and some people in the Chinese realm and international realm have even 3-starred Memory of Chaos 10. So the question is, what teams are actually the way it plays out in Endgame? Well, most teams right now, anecdotally from myself, I'm on Memory of Chaos 8, I use these kind of teams, as well as everyone in the international realm also uses very similar teams. This is kind of how it plays out. So most teams in Memory of Chaos consist of one Omega stacked damage dealer. The options generally right now people are using are Sele and Yangqing. You know, sometimes people use Clara as well. They generally have a very, very strong support or, you know, kind of offensive or defensive utility character here, like Bronya, Asta, Welt, Tinyun, Pella, you know, these kind of characters in this slot here. They generally always have at least one sustaining character, which are Bailu, Japad, or Natasha. It's one of those three. They can solo sustain the team if they have enough gear. And if you don't have enough gear, which is me right now in Memory of Chaos 8, generally this sustaining character, one of those three, is supported by another defensive themed character. And those defensive themed characters are generally going to be, you know, Clara, you know, Fire MC, March, you know, something along these lines. So it's generally going to be around there. Now, people who are super duper geared drop that defensive option here, so they wouldn't be running Japad, they'd be running another damaging support. So in this case, it would probably be something like Tinyun, and the team would look like this. But that's generally how it plays out. So one mega damage, one support, generally going to be offensive / defensive, one sustaining character or two if you're not geared enough, and then a fourth slot here for another damaging and supporting character as well. So let's understand how Luocha and Silver Wolf fits in here. All right, so the sustaining slot, we talked about 3 units there. If you don't have 2 of those 3, it's going to be pretty tough, man. It's definitely going to be a challenge. Not impossible, but definitely way, way harder if you don't have 2 of those 3. So if you don't have Bailu, if you don't have Japad, you are going to be hungry. You're going to be hungry for another sustaining character who can solo sustain your teams. And Luocha is just that. He is a character who is built to solo sustain teams. He looks like he has the kit for it. The changes to him look strong enough that he probably will be able to easily solo sustain a team with what he's got going on there. He also does have obviously a lot going on for him. That imaginary break. He's got an AoE spell, which is, it's really hard to overstate how good that is. Like it's going to be so much damage mitigation to actually dispel everything. And then he also has a cleanse, which we'll get into in a second here. Your overall Luocha is going to fill that role. So if you are missing that second primary supporting character who can sustain your team, Luocha is going to be a pretty good choice, I think, to maybe at least consider. Now, it is worth noting though that there is only a need for one of these generally on a team. Like, okay, if they crank up the damage like 2 or 3 times, you might need 2. But right now, based on what we can see in 1.0, you only need 1 sustaining character in the Ultra Endgame. Once you have like good mega gear on everyone, in Memory of Chaos 10, you need 1, right? So if you already have 1, which is Natasha, and you already have Bailu or Japad, you know, okay, his priority for you is definitely a lot lower. You won't necessarily need to save for him or, you know, consider pulling for him because you already have 2 healers. You've got that box ticked. Like, is he better than Natasha? Absolutely. He's going to be way better than Natasha. Could he be one of the best long-term investments possible because he has an AoE spell? Yeah, he totally could be. But in terms of mandatory units on your account where you need them to kind of have a functioning team, if you already have 2 healers, you've got that box checked. Okay, so Luocha is definitely going to be one that you might want to consider. Now, in terms of the risk factor, going for another healer, of course, you only do need 2. So if they were to release a 4-star in the future, and you know it was a good 4-star healer, and they could solo sustain your team, and you picked Luocha instead of like Silverwolf, Jing, or Sele, and you were really lacking in one of those slots, you might feel like, oh boy, maybe I shouldn't have done that. So just understand that he is very strong, and he can fix your account for that healing slot, but there is some risk associated with him. It would definitely feel bad if like there was another healer that came right after him, which was a 4-star, which was really strong. All right, so that is Luocha. He fits in, he's good, not too bad. You guys understand the risks as well as all the stuff we'll share with him. Next up is Silver Wolf. All right, so let's take the scenario where you're in the Ultra Endgame. You have your main damage character, you got your sustaining character, and you got 2 supports here, 2 at a time. All right, so Silver Wolf obviously carries a lot less risk. She has a pretty insane kit, I'm gonna say, with the only downside of that character being that she is hard single target. But she's very flexible, and she also does fit into both of these slots. So how does she fit into those slots? Well, in this slot here, this is kind of like the neutral role where they basically get to use their skill sometimes. She's gonna be alternating between using the basic attack and the skill, and she's gonna be implanting weaknesses on enemies like crazy. The mechanic is essentially just giving enemies a vulnerability to that element while also amplifying damage against them and mitigating damage that they deal. This is particularly powerful in certain teams. So it's very, very strong, accompanied by Sele, because she is a quantum unit. So quantum units get a set which give them 20% armor shred. Against quantum enemies, it's like doubled. It's normally 10, but against quantum enemies, it's 20%, which is a big, big deal. And also you also deal extra damage against quantum, all sorts of stuff like that. You use to break them. It's a big, big swing. And the Silver Wolf here, she can just enable that for Sele on every fight. Every fight will be a quantum fight, which is a massive deal for your roster, as it's going to kind of almost immortalize one of your DPS. They can't really not be effective on any fight, because you can give the vulnerability to the enemy that your main DPS is. So it kind of increases the longevity of the 5-star DPS that you have or eventually do pick up, which is definitely very, very strong. This also goes for characters like Yangqing. Yangqing is a character that is very reliant on the enemy being vulnerable to ice to deal a massive amount of damage. In addition to that, if you do have, and you eventually probably will get, his first Eidolon, that also relies on the enemy being frozen. And breaking enemies is the most consistent way to freeze them, and Silver Wolf just enables that straight up. In addition to that, the chance to implant a weakness is based on how many of an element is on your team. And Yangqing, for example, he always has to be played with Japad right now, so that's already 2 ice. So she's going to have a very good chance to implant ice on the teams with Yangqing in them if you do have Japad. And with Sele implanting the quantum weakness, she is quantum herself, so that's already a 50% chance to implant quantum weakness in the enemy just off of those 2 alone. So she already has built-in synergies with the current cast, very, very strong there, and I think Silver Wolf has a lot of value in this slot. In addition to that though, she also has some of the best basic skill point generation capabilities as well. She does go in this slot very nicely. She has some very, very strong defensive options on her basic attacks, and she also does have that ability to flexibly use that skill and kind of play in this role as well. This is the skill point generator slot, which normally you've got Japad, FMC, or Asa, or something along those lines in here. But Silver Wolf is probably one of the best options to go in this slot as well, which is very exciting. So when you evaluate them, Luocha is definitely something, he's like a puzzle piece that you're missing, but if you already have the puzzle complete, you might not necessarily need him. But Silver Wolf is an open-ended book. She can pretty much be placed in any team for the foreseeable future and a long time. And the reason for that is that there's 4 perspective slots per Memory of Chaos session that she can go in. She can go in the neutral supporting slot here, which alternates between basic and skill, but she can also go in the basic spamming slot here. And she also enables your other carrying characters. So that is a pretty big deal in my opinion. And I definitely see a lot of value in both of these characters, which definitely makes it pretty damn hard. So let's round it up here. So right now at the filming of this video, you actually have 4 options that we know pretty much based on our information. You can choose between Sele, Jing, Silver Wolf, and Luocha. Now, obviously we don't know when all these guys are coming out, and we're pretty much making an assumption that Luocha and Silver Wolf are even coming in 1.1. But right now, if you had to choose between all 4 of them, let me break it down for you guys. So if you do not feel confident in getting the second healer, and you want to gamble and say there's not going to be a 4-star healer in the future, Luocha kind of feels like a pretty safe bet to consider. You need that second healer. If you don't have Japad, you don't have Bailu, definitely looking pretty good. But of course, that depends on your account and your priorities. If you're willing to wait, maybe someone else is better. The next thing you need is good damage. If you're intending to 3-star the Forgotten Hall and you don't have some of the premium damage dealers, it's definitely going to be a lot harder. Not impossible, but a lot harder. And that is probably going to need to be something that you need to consider. Amplifying like a Dan Heng versus amplifying a Sele is a big difference. So maybe Sele or Jing Yuan is a little bit of a higher priority than Silver Wolf in the short term. If you're looking to get those Stellar Jades in the short term, clear out Memory of Chaos in patch 1.0 and 1.1, maybe going for Sele or Jing Yuan is a pretty big priority. But DPS is going to be a dime a dozen. There's going to be a lot of them, and in the future, I don't expect there to be any shortage of DPS. We already know of a lot more DPS coming down the pipe. Some 4-stars are likely going to be very strong DPS as well. So going for a DPS is definitely a risk. It can pay off in the short term, and it could be good. However, when we get to Silver Wolf, she is the 3rd on my priority list here, but she is also probably the one with the highest potential and the highest staying power for the future, as she does fit in 4 slots. She does something very special, and there's no one I could see ever really getting this ability probably again. MiHoYo would have to have really run the well dry in terms of ideas to give someone Silver Wolf's ability exactly, and that ability to implant weaknesses is very, very powerful, as there's already so many characters who rely on the enemy being vulnerable to their element. We already know of 2 who are 2 of the premium damage dealers, Yangqing and Sele. So I really do think that Silver Wolf has a lot of value. It's just going to be down to whether or not she feels good enough to use being a hard single target support. But I think she is probably going to be pretty good, and that is kind of going to be my breakdown there, guys. So don't take this any of this as like you must pull pull that. It's going to be down to your guys' account. And then of course, remember, if you like a character for their theme, just make sure you pull a character that you really like the theme of. First and foremost, if you don't like, Silver Wolf and you're not a fan of it, you shouldn't pull it. Overall, make sure you go with who you like. All the characters are going to be strong eventually if you gear them up correctly. You just need to get them in the right scenario and in the right fight, and they will be viable. So overall, I think that pretty much covers it. If you guys learned something new or you enjoyed the video, make sure to subscribe to the channel. Plenty more content on the way. And if you like this video specifically, make sure to give it a thumbs up. It really helps me out. And until next time, hope you guys enjoyed. Cheers.